one night I was lying in bed with my partner and my brain was going insane and it was crying out to me, I just want to be, we were saying like, I just want to be they, them. It was pronoun based. Something about the pronouns they, them, I needed it. I felt free. I felt, I can't explain it. It's so intense. And I just burst out crying because it was one of the most vulnerable things I've ever done.
In 1837, Horace Mann created the education system, a system at the time designed to pump out factory workers and professors. The same system that is still being used today in the 21st century. Now, Mann's system is backfiring. We are being moulded by the same industrial system that has existed for close to 200 years. That system delivers us into a digital economy that has no need of our outdated skills. This isn't our teachers' fault. This isn't the government's fault. This is due to a rapidly changing world full of technology and unforeseen circumstances. And us Gen Zs are caught in the middle. Welcome to the Driven Young podcast, the podcast for stressed, overwhelmed young Australians, teaching you practical life skills you can implement now to set yourself up in life. And now your host, Byron Dempsey.
Welcome back to the Driven Young podcast, and today I'm joined by Justin Martin. Justin Martin, known as JMQ, is a multi-instrumentalist and has a background in the Australian indie scene. Justin has toured internationally as Our Man in Berlin, who received a heavy TripleJ rotation and support. This is part of their production company and have worked with multiple artists, such as Pace, who some of you may know. So I met Justin through my best friend Pace, who is a musician, and they're such an amazing person. But today on the podcast, whilst we do discuss their music career and journey, we also discuss how Justin recently came out as non-binary. Non-binary is something I've wanted to explore for a while on this podcast, and Justin is the perfect person to do it with, in my opinion. They're very open, shares their entire experience, and gave me a much deeper understanding and insight into how they felt and identified. I really love this episode. We talk a lot about masculinity and what it means to be a man, among many other things. But as usual, please DM me and please DM Justin. They would love to receive your messages, especially if this connected with you on any level. And please leave a review for the podcast. That would mean the world to me. Otherwise, over to Justin. All right, we ready?
I'm so ready.
All right, Justin. Woo! Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm very excited for this episode. We've known each other for a year almost?
Yeah. Getting to a year.
We met through Pace, who obviously, if people know me, Pace is my best friend. We've got the other podcast as well. And, budding musicians, doing a lot of work together. And there's lots we want to talk about this episode. I want to get deep and talk about a bunch of really important stuff. Before we do, I always ask one question, and it's very simple. What did you do after high school? And what was going on in that decision-making process?
I love that question. So I was a sort of kid that, loved maths and science. Well, more so was good at it. So I was like, hey, let's go to uni, but I also love music. So I was like, I don't know what to do. Oh, I'm going to do the year off after high school. So I took a year off and proceeded to do only writing and I didn't do any academic stuff and I hated it. And I didn't have a purpose and I really hated it. So I took a year off and then I was like, fuck, all right, I'm just going to study engineering. And so I did a whole engineering degree.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So people are like, oh, you should have taken a year off. And I was like, I did.
Yeah.
And I still did the thing that I didn't end up doing.
Wow.
But it was because when I tried music, I didn't realize that I needed a full scope of music. I didn't know what the options were. No one was, even my piano teacher was like, don't study music, it's a waste of time. I was like, but you did that. And so I did music, but I was only writing and I didn't really know software, which I now, my full-time job is working on music software and I fucking love it. So I was too lost, and engineering, a degree to me was very structured and purposeful, and I got to go somewhere. And at that time, I was like, that's all I want.
Well, something that I've been talking a lot about, the language I've heard is it buys me time to avoid becoming an adult.
Yeah.
And it gives you an answer to the question when, 45-year-old Karen is at a barbecue and she says, what are you doing now?
That's exactly it. It's just that. Because if all of us, like everyone my age, we're chatting, no one really cares.
Yeah.
All answers are kind of equal, and the more off your answer is, the more interesting. Whereas it's those extended family members and all those annoying people that, assume something about you. And so
I've even seen, I think a lot of parents will vicariously live through their kids' success. And because they view success as this very traditional route, they love to be able to say, oh, Justin's doing engineering. I'm so proud. I'm so proud.
Kids.
Yeah. My child's doing this. But are they happy?
Yeah.
And are they fulfilled? Are they doing something they love?
That's exactly it. And it's this weird thing where my parents would happily let me do whatever I wanted to. But it was everyone else that, because I was good at maths and science, they were like, well, obviously you're going to do money degree. And then I was like, I really was always a kid that didn't want to go out of the lines, I've really come a long way to who I am now.
I was about to say.
So I dare not go off the path. I even remember, so my sister studied musical theatre, and the joke in the family was she would be the musical theatre one and I would be the one who would make money.
Right.
And I even wrote a song for her 21st, because I just wrote songs for the family. It was like, haha, whatever. And then engineering degree, finished it and was like, I really don't like engineering.
Can we just unpack, just before you move on, what you just said about how it was a joke, right?
Yeah.
But if we actually go back, that joke would have affected you.
Yeah.
Definitely. I don't know how old you were when they were saying that joke, but if you're, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, if you're hearing that for 6, 7 years of your life, that means, that would have affected, okay, I should do engineering then.
Of course.
It's subconsciously telling you, okay,
100%.
I make a lot of money, that's good. I can maybe support my sister who's following, this other pathway.
Yeah.
And that, that probably went into why you made that decision.
Yeah, 100%. Like it takes a lot. It takes a lot of I guess maybe belief in yourself to be able to to choose something that will then put you in the spotlight for maybe the wrong reasons or maybe for a joke. So for my
self-awareness, I think.
Yeah, like for my sister, she owned it and she always has. And whereas it's taken me doing all the stuff I didn't want to do to realize what I wanted to do. And now when people ask me, how did you know? I'll be like, oh, honey, I took a year off. I did engineering degree. I did all these jobs I hated. I just trust me, I know, and don't fucking tell me to go do engineering. Just shut up. So
I know multiple people who've done specifically an engineering degree. Do you know Marvin? Did you ever meet Marvin, my friend?
No.
He's such a creative, interesting human. He's got such a cool energy, and he did engineering. And he's like, I've never used it. I think it's one of those common ones that people just kind of jump into. It's very successful traditionally. And
there's always jobs apparently, even though that is still dependent on the market. So how's my core uni group, there was 5 or 6 of us. Half of us who all graduated, half of us aren't doing engineering.
Right.
So
doesn't surprise me.
You just do maths and science school and then you go, oh, this. And no one ever really gives you the right space to cultivate what that is you're looking for. And they, instead of actually giving you the space you need, they just go, oh, a year off? Because everyone else is doing the year off. So parents, everyone who decides the rules are just going, oh, a year off is acceptable. But after that, you better know. And you better know during your year off because everything else is wasting time, apparently.
Well, even for me, a year off wasn't acceptable. I don't know I can't tell you a single person who took a year off.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because my mum took a year off and she went to Norway. So she had what I like to call is an intentional year off. Yeah. I think it'd be dangerous if you take a year off and do nothing. Sure. But if you take a year off to travel, to discover yourself, to meet new people, and my mum spent a year living in Norway. She went back to Norway 4 years ago with my younger sister, and they met up with her sister, her host sister. They now both have daughters the same age, and they met up in Europe, 30 years later. And I'm just and she can still remember a bit of Norwegian, and she's meeting up to walk the El Camino next year with her as well.
Oh, so it's damn.
Just that was 1 year of her life.
Yep.
And she's got lifelong friends and she learned all these about another culture and stuff.
Yep.
And then she came back and she was a year behind her peers, but no one cares.
Same with me. I was a year behind. I was like, what are these rules? And here's me now. I'm 32 and I look at a lot of other people who knew straight after school that they wanted to do music and they didn't, and that was their plan A, whereas music was my plan B. And you know what it's like. Don't wait for your plan B. Just so I meet a lot of people who who didn't have to wait for 5 years to figure out what they wanted to do. And that definitely frustrates me, but I have to remind myself, what is this timeline of rules? Like, what does this have to be a certain age? Like, I am, because of who I am and just the way that I've decided to live my life, my, typical points, what are they, like lifetime achievements,
right,
do not line up with any of my other friends.
Like graduation, marriage, kids.
Yep.
Blah,
owning
blah,
a
blah.
house. None of that stuff is, and I love it. But it's so funny how you have to consciously create that and own that story, because it's really easy for other people to insert their story, like you say, parents, because I don't know, people are just so uncreative that you come along and you're like, I have a news story, and they're like, shut up, here's what I did, and you should do that. It's like, but don't you want to, don't we want to find new things? Isn't that exciting?
Well, we have
strange.
access to the internet now,
Yeah.
which has changed the world, right? Like you can you don't have to have a degree to do a lot of things. Like you don't need to study music. You can learn it. You don't study it officially, but you can learn it online.
Yep.
You can watch YouTube. You can just pay for courses for like that $100 instead of $40,000.
So this actually goes really well into what happens next. So I finished engineering. I was like, still in the mindset of I must study something. Like I 100% was that person in high school. I learned stuff on my own, but dare not do it for a career.
Right.
And I finished the engineering degree, and I was like, I need to study something. Music engineering, audio engineering, nailed it. And I was like, perfect. I'm a genius. And then everyone else can shut up now because I've done what, they're asking me to fucking do. And I enrolled at SAE.
Yes, I know SAE. I looked into it. It's just private, isn't it?
Private.
Very expensive.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
So, and you can't get government help. You can only get like the vet fee help, which is 25% loading at that time. So in a $40,000 degree, which is more than an engineering degree, $40,000 degree turned into a $50,000 degree.
Over what? Three years?
Over 2 years.
2 years. 25 grand a year.
And you're like, this isn't, and they're like, oh, just get a loan. You're like, but I won't pay this back.
Yeah.
I know that. Like, so I enrolled in January to start in September. I was like, okay, I've got 9 months to decide whether I want to do it.
Yeah, right.
And in those 9 months, I found out all the shit I could learn for free online.
Yeah.
And I learned so much that by the time September came along, I was like, I don't need to do this degree anymore. I already know all this stuff. And I'd started applying it in the real world, like just with people around me. And that was my first experience going, maybe I don't need to study anymore. And since then, I've never bothered I've never gone, studying is my solution. It's always learn on my own.
Yeah.
And then when I hit a wall, I go for where's one person I can get one lesson from that can just tick me to the next level.
What's even interesting, the language that you and we use, as in like, I don't study. It's like, yeah, but you study for 9 months just on YouTube.
Yeah.
It just wasn't officially, and it just wasn't through a traditional.
It wasn't, yes.
Like we still study. You can still study through, I read
100%.
books all the time. I'm always listening to podcasts and learning from people. And like, I guess I get to study as my job in a way.
Yeah.
It's just not officially.
Yep.
Even I interviewed a doctor, he's 28, he's a doctor. And he said, he dropped out of being a doctor at like 27. He went, this isn't for me. And now he teaches people like how to learn effectively. He's got a whole company around it. His name's Justin, actually.
Hey, good name.
Dr. Justin. And he was telling me that like, it's crazy how much respect parents give me because my name is Dr. Justin, not just Justin.
They're like, you just see it
Like
in their eyes.
he'll say stuff that he can just say whatever he wants because they respect him so much because he's got the doctor in front of it. He's only worked in the field for a year. You know what I mean? Because he's that's
so
such a high,
funny.
it's so much around status. And like engineering is high status.
Yeah.
And a desperate musician is low status. But then if you can make it as a musician, now you're high status.
Yeah, but you still got to keep proving yourself
Yeah.
because what's your latest thing you did? And like, one of my favorite things to do now is, to say what I do. Like now I'm a full-time songwriter and producer. And then it's to wait until we naturally get into studying. And then I'm like, I did an engineering degree. And it always, if they're older, obviously, if they're parent, then it's like, it's a complete change.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's actually more interesting talking to younger people because they kind of go, so it's just zigzagging, and you're like, yeah, I don't know, I didn't know the outcome.
Yeah.
But yeah, parents and older and Zoomers are just boomers, not Zoomers. Yeah, Very frustrating.
Yeah, very. And and that's kind of what this podcast is all about. But I guess moving forward, so you mentioned you're a songwriter, producer. So you've kind of gone into that area and now you're full-time?
Yeah, since moving to Sydney from Perth 2 years ago, myself, my writing partner, our intention was we're going to leave gigging behind and we're just going to dive in, as we know is the best thing, and just make it, only have our plan A. And we managed to make it work, which is insane because even our publishers told us not to move to Sydney. No one was on our side, you know? It's so ridiculous how little people are on your side and then you do it and they're so surprised.
Yeah.
And you're like, you could do it. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, yeah.
He's going to have self-belief. And it's almost like, and actually Pace said this in his episode, it's being hopelessly naive.
Yeah.
One of his lines was...
I love that.
His line was, had I known how difficult it was to make it as a musician, I never would have started.
That's exactly it. For me, it's a thing of, I kept realizing I didn't want to do anything else. And so when I came to the point where I knew how badly I needed music for my soul, you know, like I needed it for the majority of my day. I couldn't have another job and then do music for a little part. Music had to be the whole day. And as soon as I knew that, then I was like, well, it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. I'm so happy to be in the ridiculousness, to be in the fear, to be in the lack of financial security.
Yes, big one.
That's helped me a lot realizing, you know, because before then it was, you kind of shift a bit. And I mean, even through COVID, I'm like, do I need another job?
Yeah.
Haven't, but
I've gotten close as well.
Scary, hey?
Like it's tricky, the financial part.
Yeah.
You know, it's so hard. There's a line someone said, and it was Dr. Justin. He was just like, how much would I have to pay you to give up on your dream? To give up on what you want to do? And like the average answer, $600,000 to $1 million a year.
Yep.
Yeah, most people settle for, you know, an $80,000 a year, $100,000 a year job.
Crazy,
and it's just such a norm. And I believe it's a privilege that we have in Australia to be able to choose something we love.
Yep.
Billions of people don't have that privilege.
Yep.
So we might as well take advantage of it. Because there's total validity in saying, well, some people just have to work to survive. Yeah, that's totally true. But most people in Australia, we have the opportunity to pursue something that we actually love and fulfills us.
Yeah.
And not many people in the world can say that.
Yeah, definitely. Even like culturally, it's really interesting how like my parents, I'm first generation Australian. So my parents coming here, they kind of came with their sort of, you know, you have like Portuguese cultural mentality and you're trying to bring that into like the Australian mentality. And even though they were raised very strict and my grandparents are so strict and couldn't imagine, you know, anything except food and religion. But my parents on purpose were like, you know what, we're flipping the old narrative because we know so many other people who were their contemporaries that weren't really allowed to do what they wanted. Even my dad, he was like, I'm going to do accounting because it's too hard. It was hard enough for him to get into the high school he went to because in South Africa, Portuguese people were not meant to go to certain high schools and were not meant to go to university. Right. It was that like, what's the word? That's segregated.
Yeah, segmented, segregated.
Just like, oh, you look a certain way. Oh, you're not going to be smart.
It's racist.
It's so racist.
Yeah.
Like, and so my parents purposefully were like, you know what, let's fuck that off. And it's so interesting when I know their story and their conscious decision. And then you have like multi-generational Australian families who they just carry the same bullshit and they kind of just go, and you're like, you are from such a privileged place.
I know.
And you're choosing to fuck it up for the next generation. This is insanity.
It blows my mind because, you know, younger people, we love to talk crap about the older generations.
Yeah.
And it's often true and valid. But like, we think they're so much worse than us, but we're just following, everyone's doing the same thing. We're doing the same mistakes they made. Yeah. And it's often because, you know, they're putting that pressure on us. And I was lucky enough that my parents didn't put that pressure. You know, that mum made me apply for unis as like just do it anyway. And I was like, I did it anyway. But I was never forced to go down that pathway. Same. And I'm very lucky. And I also chose a degree. It was going to be film. Yep. And it's like music. It's like you don't need that to be successful. Whereas engineering, you need a degree. Yes. Or doctoring, you need a degree. Yep. Like the qualification is what you're paying for. Yep. Whereas film, you don't need a qualification. In fact, most successful filmmakers don't have one. So I was lucky in that sense that I wasn't, but I still felt like, as you said, all your friends and everyone was kind of going down that pathway. Yeah. So there's still an element of that older generation. It's kind of generational trauma
Yes.
We've kind of
100%.
spoken about, Pace and I learned about that word at this, that men's workshop. I don't know if you remember, we went to this like men's workshop and they're talking about that. And they spoke about this idea of generational trauma, especially prevalent in men, because you look at like our grandparents, right? My God, he's never shown emotion. I'll never see him show emotion. That's just his generation.
Yep.
He grew up as a builder in New Zealand. It's cold. You're tough.
Yeah.
And then you can see my dad's way better, but he's still got a lot going on. And I can see I'm way better, but I've still had to work a lot on myself.
Yeah.
And then you can see if I pass it down to my son, I'd hope he'd be better. Hopefully we can get to this point where we are much healthier. And so that
100%.
generational trauma is just passing down in multiple different facets. I think it passes down in the traditional pathway as well, like the route of having to get a safe job and everything.
Yep. And whether you have the family and, you know, having the grandchildren, like that sort of typical stuff. But yeah, like I love talking about that stuff. And I did a men's workshop back in 2019 with my dad. And that was a huge moment for us because we really got to discuss the intergenerational stuff. And I really got to hear his experience, you know, because we had to write a letter to our dads, and I got to hear his experience from his dad, and it was just that understanding. It was beautiful in that it helped me get closer to him, but also allowed me to be more comfortable with my voice, because I was like, wow, he was so different to his dad. I'm allowed to be as different as I need to be to my dad. And it's interesting how, you know, it took me, you know, 31 years of my life to realize that I didn't want to exist as a cis male anymore. It took me all of this sort of, because of all that intergenerational trauma, I know for a fact, it sounded so wanky, I know for a fact, my dad and my granddad, they talk about, there's like, in that particular family line, there was always like one or two men that were more feminine, just soft, just happened to be a bit softer, not hard ass. And they were always made fun of and called menina, which is girl in Portuguese. And it's so interesting because you have my granddad who is quite soft compared to my grandma, who is like, you know, she's the one who never smiled, always beating everyone up, like hectic. And then my dad, who's quite soft as well. And then it comes down to me, and I almost feel like I'm just completing the journey of it. And but even then, it still took me, you know, all that time moving to Sydney to break that intergenerational trauma, to go, hold on, who am I? To then come out and, you know, as non-binary, as queer, as like, wow, this is actually me. You know, how much more trauma am I cutting off? Like, how much? What's left? Because I've only just started dealing with this.
Do you think it's also because it's become much more normalized over the past 5 years? You actually started to think and go, whoa. Because I guess if you had never heard of it, you wouldn't never consider it as an option.
Correct. Yep.
But now you're going, oh my gosh, all these other people are coming out. There's actually a whole nother world. I'm starting to see myself as that. Because I know you, and I knew we were going to talk about this. And as you're explaining your experience with engineering, I was like, I wonder if there's a similar experience with this, just having this realization of like going through and going, oh my God, and taking a step back. Yeah.
So the what I noticed for me, coming out as non-binary is it's very expression based. It's very, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but expression is the best way that I can say it, and you can easily connect it to visual things because that's kind of, we're all very visual. That's how I socialize. So what I wear, how I do my hair, how I just the choices that I make and that I allow myself to make, for me then create this feeling of being non-binary and just it's so beautiful and so centered. And I have been sitting there and going, what has my journey been? And I realized so every time up to moving to Sydney, I would always try and push the boundaries a bit. So I went through like high school and I was never really pushing the boundaries. You know, I was always like the nice kid and play it safe and everything.
When you say pushing the boundaries, you mean like
rebel.
Okay. So like anything stepping outside of the norm.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So I got good grades. I did this, you know, like if I got in trouble, it was my parents like, oh, Justin got in trouble. This is insane. He's way out of line. Like the one big joke between us is we all did this, you know, ridiculous teenage shit. And four of us, we all got in trouble. And I was the only one who my punishment was getting a tutor.
Oh, right. Yeah,
because in my dad's, and I mean, it worked. I ended up crushing the subject that I was tutored on, but it's just such a different mentality. So yeah, as soon as I left high school, I was like, you know what? I'm going to get all these piercings. I started getting piercings. I was like, you know what? I'm going to dye my hair. You know what? I'm going to wear all these colorful clothes. And then I just kept adding more to that, you know? And then it was like, you know what? I'm just going to do music. You know what? I'm going to get tattoos.
It's kind of like if you were to go from 0 to 100, it'd be really scary.
Yes.
But you just go, I'm just going to wear this. And then people get used to you wearing that. And then you go, all right, next one. All right, next one. And I've kind of been doing that as well.
Yeah.
Like just like, I'll start wearing rings. All right, I'm going to wear a necklace. All right, now I'm going to change my style. I'm going to start wearing different pants. And suddenly it just becomes who you are.
And then you get those little compliments along the way.
Yes,
You're like,
yes. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
They are. And that's the thing. Like if you're surrounded, like where I was coming from Perth, which, you know, is just such a small place compared to Sydney, you don't get a feeling that if you push the boundaries too much, you'll be held up. There's just not really enough of that. And in order to see the people who I needed to see, who looked different, I had to go to like two suburbs out of all of them, you know? Whereas in Sydney, you have huge areas. So I only ever stepped out in what I thought would be allowed and what would, you know, still get me work as a musician, as a gigging musician. I dare not, you know, even having like stretching my ears, I was like, are they going to be okay with that? As if anyone fucking cared.
Yeah, you're right. Especially in that industry.
I know, right? No one cares.
Like all the industries in the world.
That was the best thing about leaving engineering, because I used to have so many piercings. I had to take them all out for vac work and I never got them back. And I was just like, fuck you, engineering. You stopped me expressing myself. And so now anytime people are talking about jobs not allowing them to wear things, I'm just like, oh my God, what is this? Who is this stopping?
It's a very
What
old
is this
school,
productivity that it's not allowing?
It's a very old school mentality, isn't it? Yeah.
Very uniformity.
Oh, even school. I mean, it's always interesting, like the uniforms at school. Like I think I had zero self-expression. I had no idea about fashion because I never. All you did was I played sport on the weekend and I went to school. Yep. So it's like I never had an opportunity to ever try wearing it. Especially as a guy, there's no one telling you to do anything as well.
100%.
And it wasn't until I guess COVID. It was because of COVID. I've got some money from the COVID cash and I was bored. I might do some online shopping. And I was like, you know what? I kind of want to change my style because I've never actually had a chance to play around with it.
Yeah.
And that's my advice would be to actually any men or I guess anyone who's looking to change their style. It doesn't have to be crazy. Just as we said, do one thing. Start wearing something and then slowly think of it as a year-long process.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to just bang because that's very scary.
100%.
Like that's very uncomfortable. But just go this, then this, and you get compliments along the way, which builds up your confidence. So by the time a year later, you're a completely different style, and that's just who you are.
Yeah, and then to add on to that, really don't forget self-compassion, because you can have a lot of, you know, we always have this feeling of we need to be somewhere, or we're so desperate to get out of an uncomfortable feeling and we go, this could be it. And it's okay if that's not it. And it's okay if you see someone else, you know, wearing or doing something that may be too scary. You know, just trust that every step you're taking is for you. And like, if I can be an example, it's like, I don't know many other people that just like to come out. I know so many other people who, you know, they knew their sexuality or whatever when they were a teenager.
Like deep down.
Yeah, they just kind of, and I was just like, it took me a while. And that's me. I am the person that I'm like baby stepping. So yeah, that's self-compassion and to just be like, it's okay. And I'm allowed to change my mind at any point in any time. And that is not it's not to do with anyone else.
Regardless of other people's opinions.
Yeah.
Because the quote I love to refer is the number one regret of the dying is I wish I would have lived a life more true to myself rather than lived a life that others expected of me.
Yes. And older generations will try push that bullshit onto you.
Yeah.
And it is so useless.
Yeah. Because I remember, and I think I said this to you, like we did a goal setting session at the beginning of this year, if you remember. And I don't think you'd come out at that point.
No.
Yeah. And I remember
I was very like just
teetering.
Because that's fucking scary.
For sure. And I remember like you said, I just want to wear a dress once.
Yeah, I know. And I didn't
like one time. That was your goal, was to wear it one time.
At that point, I'd only bought a couple skirts. Like very.
Skirt. Yeah.
No, but it was a dress.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe I hadn't bought any. I think I hadn't bought any. No, you're right.
I just remember you wanted to do it once, and now every time I see you, you're doing it, and every day. And this was like what, 6 months, 7 months?
And you know what's so funny? This is the fastest I've ever had change in my life, and it's so scary, but I need it. So like, clearly I was pushing it down for so long. It comes out eventually, and you want it to hopefully come in a positive way, as opposed to you can really have to, people force you to push things down, and it can come out in really self-destructive ways. And like, that is, our brains have a way of forcing us to deal with things. And even if those ways are, intrusive thoughts or something, like,
let's just say
we're not built to run away from things, unfortunately.
My first viral video ever was about an experiment between boys and girls. So it was a boys versus girls experiment. And they had toddlers in a room. They had girls in one room and boys in the other. And the scientists would come in and say, shh, there's a baby sleeping next door. And they put a baby monitor down next to the kids. Then they'd leave the room. And then the baby would start crying. It would play through the monitor. And the girls kind of ran up, knocked on the door, and got parents and asked them for help. The boys walked up to the monitor and switched it off. But they had wired up the kids to see their vitals and everything. And the boys got way more stressed out and way more emotional than the girls. Now, this doesn't prove anything, but they were kind of saying perhaps men are more emotional. But as you said, we bottle up. We're masters at bottling it up. And it comes out in aggression, typically, which is what we see, and other forms of emotion, which is very unhealthy.
Yeah. And I think that's just what's so cool, is that sort of stuff is interesting information, because it opens to more questions, which is so beautiful. You go like, why? Like, my first thought is, this intergenerational trauma. If, granddad is like, I am scared for my life if I express my emotions.
Yes.
If enough generations are doing that, then you create that fear response.
Yep.
So you dare not. So then, like you said, emotions kind of like bottle up. So if you're not, and if you don't feel safe, then your vitals will spike. And so like, it's like these, kids are just born into.
We are. And I mean, I'm talking for men.
It's so bullshit, because we didn't do anything wrong.
No, exactly. And I'm talking on men specifically, because, that's kind of how I've grown up.
And I've spent most of my life as a man, so.
Yeah, exactly.
I fucking get it.
Yeah. What was I going to say? It passes down. As I said, I've seen my granddad here. My dad's got better. And then I'm here. But if we don't deal with our emotions in certain ways, it does bottle up. Yeah. And it's something I've been studying a lot on vulnerability and the power of vulnerability. I don't even know if you've read Brené Brown's work.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you
Obsessed.
Like, she's, like, the queen of that topic of shame and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And the number one fear that men have universally has been being perceived as weak.
Yep.
And so we'll do everything to make sure that we're not weak.
Yep.
And if we perceive showing emotion as weakness, then we won't do it.
Yep.
And if we're told you can't cry, as that means you're weak, then we'll do it. Well, I mean, we'll keep it bottled up, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think we need to flip the narrative. Because it's really, as Brené Brown says, showing emotion is a strength. It's the truest form of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I can see from like an outsider perspective, from like if women are going, just show emotion. It's from logic, it seems so simple, but because it's so ingrained, it's so difficult. And so it's a very weird thing.
Yeah. It's strange that to be in the body and go like, I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah. Like, to just cry. I can't.
It took me until I was 28. I still remember and this is after I've had lots of therapy, and I was doing lots of work in my relationship at the time, and I was reading Brené Brown.
Nice.
I was reading so much fucking psychology shit. And so there you go. You're indoctrinated to believe that you can't cry and you have to read all this shit. And I remember one night I finally managed to go past the anxiety and just feel the emotion. And I just cried. It was like 12 o'clock at night, and I was on the couch crying. And I was like, is this it? I've seen women do this I've seen my mum do this all the time. Like, I was like, oh my God, I get it.
But what do men do when we see
hell.
women doing that?
We get so scared.
And we just kind of go,
I don't know how to deal with it.
That's just women being emotional, right?
Yep.
And again, we make
minimize and downplay and negative. Yeah,
and then we go, oh, so we shouldn't be doing that.
Yep.
And it just gets worse and worse and worse.
It's crazy. And you learn this stuff from everyone else. Like, there is always a period where you're curious and other people tell you the narrative. And it's this funny thing of being, because like one of the funniest things about going out of male identifying to non-binary is you've grown up with all this privilege. You're like, hey, that was great. I'm going to leave now.
Yeah.
And it's so funny leaving all the privilege because you look back and you're like, oh my God. And it still stays, obviously, because I was grown up with it and socialized with it. But it's crazy how when you're born as a boy, you're born into the power, right? Like you're like at the top. Even someone like me who's like one of the darkest kids in school, and I'm still even not that dark. You know what I mean? Like one of the darkest kids in school. And I was still, that gave me a bit less power, but I still, was up there, still a guy. And it's crazy how it's kind of like we have the most power and, we're taught that we're better than these people and they're expressing this, or we shouldn't do that because we need to lord over them and we need to have power over them and we want to keep our power.
It's almost like
keep our position.
It's almost if you use the word leader, it's like a leader should show strength.
Yes.
Therefore they should. And if we view strength as not crying and not showing emotion, then that's what we want to be.
Yes.
Whereas if we actually go, hold on, a leader needs to be vulnerable and open and be able to have these deep conversations.
Yeah.
That's a narrative we should be trying to switch. Because when you say we're taught to believe this, people aren't literally teaching us.
No,
it's conditioning.
It's very sneaky.
It's conditioning and beliefs and references. And
it's part
beliefs.
of the culture. It's so in there. You don't even talk about it.
You couldn't put a finger on it.
No.
So where did this come from? Well, it came from me watching Iron Man.
Yep.
It came from Gossip Girl was the most toxic thing. Have you seen Gossip Girl?
Just snippets.
Well, the two main guys, there's a session where they get like depressed or like whatever, they're feeling down, and one of them gives his black book to the other guy and he gives him his penthouse and it's just full of women that he can call up and hook up with. And it's like, this is their depiction of a male going through depression, just banging, models and prostitutes. And you're like, this is such a horrible representation of a man going through depression.
That's the best they could do.
I don't know the best they could do. I just remember thinking, this is so toxic. Like, this is such a bad mentality for young boys to be looking at.
Yeah.
Have you seen that guy, Andrew Tate?
Oh my God.
Have you seen him?
Oh my God. Just disgusting.
Yeah, because
so sad I know it's dumb saying it still exists, but when you surround yourself by good people.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh no, this shit still exists.
Yeah, you forget, don't you? No, you do, genuinely.
It's so fucked.
But like, I remember because... one of the key points I was speaking with this guy is because he puts out the most crazy stuff, and obviously he does it intentionally, right? The one thing he's good at, he's very entertaining. He speaks so fast, he'll talk about all this stuff. And for me, when I watch him say something like, he basically says women are property, or like a man's allowed to cheat, but a woman isn't, and stuff like that. And for me, I just kind of laugh because I know it's just so ridiculous. But a 14-year-old boy isn't laughing, going, it's ridiculous. They think that's...
My cousins I could see them like getting pulled into that stuff, exactly like that.
Because we have the maturity to go, this is ridiculous, this guy's just an idiot. But younger boys don't. And that's my worry.
Yep.
It's not how it's affecting me and my friend. It's like, what is this guy teaching the young, impressionable men or boys of the next generation?
100%.
It's like, oh God.
100%.
It's so bad.
And it's so, I think a lot of men don't take that responsibility seriously enough because we put so much on kids, especially teenagers. Oh my God, we expect teenagers to just fucking know and be like, no, you should do this and you should organize this and you should for their whole life. Meanwhile, the adults aren't doing dick and they're not leading by their example. And it makes no sense. And then they see, a boy will be like, oh, and will slut shame someone. And the parent's like, oh, and you're like, well, what are you doing to provide an example that isn't, what are you, like
Brené Brown's point when she talks about parents is like, studies have shown that it doesn't matter how much you teach a child, whatever you say to a child, the most powerful thing is how you live your life.
Yes.
Children will want to emulate that.
100%.
So if you live your life by certain morals and values, your child, whether you teach them or not, is going to want to emulate that.
Yeah.
And I see with my parents, I have the same values and morals that they taught me, but they didn't sit me down and pull out a book and teach me this stuff, right? It's
Make you learn it.
Exactly. You just learn it because you want to emulate your parents.
Yep.
And yeah, that's the issue. If these young boys are on TikTok or whatever, and they're going, maybe they don't have a father figure, or they feel disconnected, and they find someone like this guy who's all by traditional success of male, archetypes. Yeah. He's in shape, he's a fighter, he's strong, he's rich, he's got the nice cars, he's got the women and everything. They go, oh, that's what being a man is. He must know what to say. It's like, oh, this is a danger.
Yes, and then schoolyard politics and bullying just make things 1,000 times worse. Like, it was one of the hardest places to try to just, you got to spend most of your day there. If you don't happen to fit in, you're fucked.
Yeah.
And then your parents are like, well, you better go to school. You're like, but I am so fucking depressed. And so you are really kind of like, well, I better fit this mold. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to exist at the end of high school.
So you start to, I guess, mold is a good one. You start to mold yourself into who you are to fit within the others.
Yeah. You kind of go, you don't completely change yourself, but you really squeeze it in there. And Brené Brown says it's the the little cube that
Right.
men just get put into this cube, and you're like, that's it, that's the cube.
I mean, for us, we teach masks.
Yeah.
So we have different masks, right?
Yep.
You go up to the sports guys and you get a mask, or you go up to your family, you got a different mask.
Yeah.
You go up to your work friends, you've got a different mask. Because how often are the masks off and it's just your authentic self?
Yes.
And I think, I mean, I'm privileged enough and I'm lucky enough, and I put a lot of work into it, I feel like I always have my mask off. And that's because I surround myself with people like yourself, like Pace and everything, which is, and you know my belief on, I think the number one goal in your 20s should be to find good quality people.
Yeah.
Because any issue that you have is only going to be easier with good quality people around you supporting you.
Yeah.
As you said, you didn't even consider non-binary as an option until you moved to Sydney.
Yeah.
You started going, whoa, hold on.
It's funny, like people talking about, I'm just thinking about all the shitty people that will kind of hate representation, or like, why did you make that character black or something? You're like, oh my God, it makes such a big deal seeing yourself.
Yes.
Holy shit.
And it's so easy. You know, because I've got the perspective of a white man, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, why it doesn't really, like, the best example is the Wiggles. Right?
Yes.
When they had women to the Wiggles, I was like, oh, that's cool. I don't really care about it. I haven't done much opinions. But now that I've done a lot of work with beliefs and stuff, I was like, holy crap, that is so important.
Yep.
Having a female Wiggle, because now girls can be like, oh, there's someone, and it's not consciously happening.
No.
They're not 4-year-olds going, oh, it's a woman, that makes me feel better. It becomes normalized where they start to think, oh, this is my world as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it is so important. And it's so easy to play it off as, oh, it's not that important. But it's like, you don't get it. And I could never get it. But because I've worked a lot in this space, it's like, you have to understand, if you're an outlier, seeing someone look like you on a screen or in whatever it is can give you so much confidence.
It's crazy. And it's annoying that our brains we'll always have that curious, open child-like part of us that needs to feel safe to exist, you know? There's always going to be a certain percentage that are the rebels and are like, I don't care what you say, I'm going to stand out. But there's probably more people that need to see to go, oh, that's allowed. Oh, amazing, you know?
Have you seen Sex Ed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the representation in that show is just absolutely insane. Even to the point of like, I remember Jackson, the sporty guy, how they showed him how he was the kingpin of school and everything. And then they go back and his mothers are just fighting and they're pushing so much pressure that he breaks his own hand, and they actually unpack that side of things.
So intense. Yeah.
And so,
you're like, yes, I want to know this.
Yeah.
This is the stuff I want to know.
And again, this is all happening subconsciously.
Yep.
Like people probably consciously go, well, that's cool. There's someone like me on cinemas, but kids aren't. They're just going, if we have representation across all movies and stuff, and kids watch that, it just becomes, they have so much confidence built in.
Yeah.
Because go, oh yeah, I can do that.
It just is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like it's not the one-off character, or it's not this. It just is. Like even seeing, I don't know if you've seen Heartstoppers. No. One of the best things I've ever seen. Movie, and it's just like a, sorry?
Movie or show?
Show.
Okay.
And it's just like a teenage, friendship, romance sort of thing, but it's specifically a queer show. Like I say that as if it like, the reason I say that is just because I grew up watching OC, and I was like, I would love if this was instead of the OC. Because the OC was like, oh, and here's two hetero couples, and they brought in someone that was like lesbian. It was like, oh my God, there's a lesbian on the show. And then watching this show, you're just watching people that are like straight or bi or gay, and you're like, well, that was easy.
And it's not forced, because there's often a lot of like, oh God, they bring in a gay character and you're like, oh, that was not, it just felt so like, we just put him in there for the sake of it.
Yeah, it's always a side piece.
They don't weave it into the actual story.
Exactly.
It's like, and they often make it, that's their character. He's gay. Or they're gay. It's like, they can just be the main character and happen to be gay as well. Like it doesn't have to be their whole arc.
It's so uncreative, yeah.
Which almost makes it, does probably more harm than good when they do really poor writing. And that's where I think Sex Ed's so amazing, because it's just so flawless and seamless from my perspective.
And just talking to people, like I'm in a band, and there's an 18-year-old, and she was just saying, this show is so fucking relatable. Like she had a really shitty principal, like the principal in season 3, and I was like, oh my God, this is so like, it's, and it's funny because it'll only be like the shitty parents being like, oh, this is dumb, and you're like, this is real life.
Yeah,
like, This is
100%. But yeah, is there anything else? I guess just kind of going back to maybe for anyone who's listening to this, when you decided to come out, like what were the signs for you? What did you start to notice? Because you said you didn't really know until
it
like,
snuck up on me.
It wasn't like people know for 10 years deep down and it's repressed and they're scared of everything. For you, it was a little bit different.
For me, For me, it really came out before I kind of realized, I guess. So I know like the big moments. So the first moment was moving to Sydney, allowing myself to be separated from everything in Perth and everyone there. So I could be a new person, so to speak, here, and people would just go, oh yeah. So
you can reinvent yourself.
Reinvent myself. Also, my job was not gigging anymore. I didn't have to be in front of people all the time. So I could wear whatever I wanted. One of the first people that I wrote with was Pace, and his nails were painted. And I was like, you can paint it. Guys can paint their nails? Literally, that's what I swear to God, I never wanted to paint my nails in my life. I never wanted to put on makeup. A few things, being in Sydney gave me permission, as crazy, but that's how my brain works. And then I was like, oh. And then I started growing out my hair and it was all curly and I was like, oh, I feel good. And then I started buying earrings. I was like, oh, and then...
It's the thing we're talking about, the step.
It's the little steps.
Little, yeah.
Yep, all within the safety of being a guy. You know, I was like, oh, I'm just expressing myself as a guy. And I also moving to Sydney, but also having such a supportive partner. Oh my God, like super just, you know, I could look like anything, wear anything, and she would just be like, I love you, you're amazing, I'm attracted to you. So that really fucking helped. And I think it got to the point where I had started putting on I was putting on eyeliners before I came out as non-binary, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is scary as fuck. So every new thing I tried was scarier. Nail polish was like, black nail polish, you know.
It's still very manly.
You know. Then I started wearing then it was, eyeliner. And then I remember going to a gig and Pace's mate, Tess, was like, you look beautiful. And I was like, oh my God, she knows. But I didn't know. But
she's onto me.
She's onto me. Like, I was just like, this is great. It was like.
Is that, do you think, because like beautiful usually traditionally used for women?
Yeah, I think any guy wants to be called beautiful, to be honest.
I don't think I've ever been called beautiful.
Right? It's such a good feeling.
Oh, well, maybe one day.
Yeah, you got to get spontaneously though. You can't.
Yeah, you said it right now. Like it wouldn't mean.
I reckon with those rings, that get you.
Well, me and Pace wore eyeliner for the formal night.
Yeah.
Subtle.
But you both look stunning. You both look beautiful.
I loved it.
Did that work?
There we go.
But
even then, that was a little step for me. And I was doing it with Pace. Yep. And it's very subtle.
Yep.
In fact, I kind of wanted to go more.
I know. Right?
Do you know what my logic was? Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Same.
Oh. I was like,
there's a guy.
he's a sex icon as well. So
100%.
So it's like, well, if he's a masculine sex idol,
that's
then
exactly it.
How could anyone like? Okay, that's interesting. It's funny you had the same thought.
And Arrow.
Oh yeah, true. Because he wears it for the.
He has like the eye makeup.
And Batman, the latest Batman, he has it as well.
Just super. I mean, I love superheroes.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
I love this. Fuck. So yeah, get me back on track.
Nails, eyeliner.
Yep. So I was trying all the things. I started, buying new pants stuff. I was like, ooh, I'm so fucking excited. Whatever.
Yeah.
And then I remember, and I started. I don't know if this is a thing that I think it's the thing that all. With the age of Googling, a lot of queer people, Googling, am I this? Am I this? And so I started Googling, what am I like? And I went through, I was like, am I gay? I don't know. I just Googled everything.
Like Buzzsprout. No, yeah. BuzzFeed, just like a quiz.
Yeah, queer buzzwords. Yeah. There was, I definitely did some quizzes.
Yeah.
100%. You can't not do it. If it's there, I'm going to do it.
Of course, yeah.
So and obviously, you're still going to find some quizzes that will still box you out because, even in the open spaces, people are still going to try and categorize you.
Well, a quiz gives you an answer.
It gives you an answer.
And it really does know who you are. So.
Exactly. It's not trying to be nice.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, whatever. And I kind of sat with it. And then one night I was lying in bed with my partner and my brain was going insane and it was crying out to me, I just want to be... we were saying like, I just want to be they, them. It was pronoun based. Something about the pronouns they, them, I needed it. I felt free. I felt I can't explain. It was so intense. And I just burst out crying because it was one of the most vulnerable things I've ever done. Wow. You know, like I hadn't been thinking about it that long.
Wow.
And I was just burst out to her, and I was like, I don't know anything. Like, she was like, what do you want from me? I was like, I don't know. I'll just,
yeah.
She was like, do you want me to call you, you know, what do you want your pronouns? I'm like, I don't know. Let's just ease into it. And I still like, I'm still practicing, you know, asking and correcting people. Yeah. And, you know, because you get taught a lot, don't bother someone, you know, don't correct someone, especially as a guy. Oh, we're just joking. Like, you know, and so, just banter. Yeah. So yeah, I was just like freaked out, and then slowly I was like, and then I started telling people, and I was like, ooh, it feels good telling people, but only the right people, you know? So I was just like slowly, anyone close to me, and I told my parents, I told my partner, I told my housemates. And then as I told people, then I started buying more clothes, and then I just started, and just little things like I was like, oh, I'm allowed to walk different now. Ridiculous. This is insight into guys. You have to walk a certain way. You have to talk a certain way. It's so
such
dumb.
A box thing, isn't it?
It's such a block thing.
And if you're not in the box, then you're, you know, shamed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's definitely changing. But
definitely.
I mean, maybe I think that because of the people I surround myself with. But then I hear stories from my sister in high school. I'm like, oh God, they're just as bad as I was. They're just as bad as the guys when I was in school 5 years ago.
Like we have to believe we're moving forward to keep that hope.
Yeah.
But still remember that they're the people that are, you know, if we ignore that there's any shit people, then...
Well, if we get stuck in our echo chamber...
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, and we go, oh yeah, no, the world's great. And we go, oh wait, that's right. There's other people out there.
And we need to know, because we need to be able to believe... Because those kids will tell you what's going on. If you don't believe them, that is really fucked. You know, like it's a big deal. I
mean, I guess it's baby steps. It's almost like
it's crazy.
The word coming out is almost misleading.
Yeah,
because it's like you step out and that's it.
So here's one of the most interesting things. So I started, of course, since I came out, then I started messaging a mate of mine. I was like, do you have any, such a broad question, do you have any queer podcasts? She was like, you need to be more specific. I was like, I don't really know. This is all very new to me. And I found one. I found a bunch that my friends and family like randomly listen to. And one has come out, I think it's come out wherever you are, by this guy called, Sean Zepps. And it's just, he just interviews people and their coming out story. And his thing that he's always starts with is...
It's such a good concept.
Yeah, it's great.
That's such a simple, powerful concept.
Yeah. But one of the coolest things was, and as soon as he said it, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly describes it. It's when did you first come out and when did you last come out?
Ah, yes.
So everyone talks about the first coming out, but it's the everyday coming out. And a lot of it is non-verbal. So to exist, I can only speak for myself, but to exist as a non-binary person, every time you walk around, you are coming out. By just being outside your house, you're coming out. And it is so different to walking around as a guy. Walking around as a guy, you just have a shield all your life, or you maybe build one as well. And you kind of go, no one's going to fuck with me. Like, and I'm, 191 centimeters. Like, I'm tall.
Which is like 6'3"
or something.
6'3", yeah.
So, and I used to have a beard. Like, I used to have a look that, probably people didn't want to try and whatever. Whereas now I'm walking around and I'm wearing, I'm wearing skirts and I got shaved legs. I might be wearing makeup. And it is every single place you walk around to, people are going, what is this person? What are you? How do you exist? And the funny thing is, if I don't do that and I don't come out just by existing, I feel so fucking invisible. And it's so funny because, again, it is this weird juxtaposition of coming from being so... I mean, I still had this invisibleness from like my skin color and stuff, but as a guy, you are visible a lot. And so when you go out of that to, going to suddenly people being confused, and you're kind of like, this is a lot.
So for you, I mean, it's an interesting situation. It was like a very stark contrast.
Yeah.
So you went from this to this, and you could see the difference quite clearly.
Yeah, and it's the feeling, like as soon as I knew what I needed, very similar to music, as soon as I knew that I needed to do music and I felt it deeply, I couldn't. You couldn't. If you push me into a
this is why when you first started telling me the story, I was like, I wonder if it's going to link to his coming out story. Because your coming out story.
Hey, good pickup.
Slip up.
That was pretty quick though.
His coming out story, because it's just so similar. It's like that. The self realization of like, and that because I think people are chasing that feeling of of what do I want to do with my life? Or like, who am I? And is there going to be a moment where it just happens? And I think for some it might, and for some it doesn't. For me, I can't pinpoint any exact moments, but there's lots of different moments that led to get me to where I am.
Yep.
And my thing's always just, I just go with the flow.
And you're just chasing those moments.
Yeah, really.
If you don't get one for a while, you're like, oh, well, I think I need to fucking change it up. I
love that.
That's exactly it. And so now it's so funny. I always find it's funny I guess the thing we can both relate to is going down the non-traditional career path. As soon as you know you want it, as soon as you're out of the ignorance.
Oh my God.
it's amazing, but it's insanity.
Yeah.
Because you're like, this is insane.
I think
I choose to do this. This is madness.
And so many people underestimate, I think, the feeling of just having the same amount of money coming in every week. Yeah. Like how valuable that is. As someone who's only actually just recently achieved that in the past month. Since I finished high school, I've never had that consistency of just like, all right, every week I get $1,000 or $500 or whatever it is. I might get $10,000 and then nothing for 6 months. And it sounds pretty crazy to people. It's like, oh, it's not a big thing, but it adds so much stress.
Yeah.
And like just living your life. And then so many things on top of that is, just...
Because everything else is based around consistent payments.
Yes.
And
that's how the world works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pay your rent every week. Everything.
Why don't you get paid every week? You're like, well, I just don't like...
But I love the unknown.
Yep.
I love diving into the unknown.
Yep.
That's where the most exciting things happen.
Yes. Yeah. Just like smash everything right now.
Yeah.
That has been more and more my mantra every year. Like leaving engineering, I was like, oh, into the unknown.
Yeah, unknown.
And then traveling, I went overseas and then just to see if I wanted it, and I fucking hated it.
Really?
If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have known that I would have loved music this much.
Well, it's one of the other top regrets of the dying is so many people, very rarely do they regret the risks that they took, but they always regret the risks that they didn't take.
Yes.
And so my mantra would be, I'd rather take the risk and fail to have it slap me in the face, but at least I gave it a shot.
Yep.
Because I don't want to be, 80 years old with that feeling going, oh, I wonder what would have happened if, or if I had done that thing, or if I had asked out that person. It's like, how different would my life be? What could I be doing? There's a story actually, do you know Fabio, one of our friends, the drone pilot?
Oh, yes. I love that story.
Yes. I've reshared it, have I? The grandma one?
Oh, no.
Oh, no, there's one.
I was thought about him.
Oh, yeah.
Recruited.
Yes. But he shared a story where he was out doing shooting some stuff in the country of Australia. And a photography group came with a bunch of kind of older people. And there's one woman who went, oh, look at you. You're so lucky. I had to wait until I finished my job before I could get into photography. And she said it way better or something. Yeah. And then she just left. And Fabio was like,
leave you with that.
Just like drop this bomb. It's like, you're so lucky. I had to wait until I retired before I could do what I really wanted to do. And then just left. And he's like,
what do I do with this?
It's like an angel, or like, just someone coming down, just dropping this information. And it was so poignant because he had, quit his corporate job and is now pursuing what he wants to do full time.
Yeah.
And it is like, you don't want to be, there's another quote, die with memories, not dreams.
Yep.
You don't want to die with dreams.
Yeah.
Like, create those memories.
That's exactly it. And it's what's so important is that we continue to foster that culture that allows people to take those risks, because so many people are like, why don't you take a risk? And you're like, but you never said it was good to take a risk unless it was this particular risk, or, the acceptable risk is buying a house and you're in $1 million of debt, but that you're allowed to take that risk. But you better not, you better not study music, or you better not, wait for a job that might pay you 10 grand in a month. Better buy a house instead. Like, it's so weird, what we're allowed to risk.
Well, you've got to tune out the noise.
Yeah.
And it's like, you really just got to listen to yourself. Like, really just listen to yourself. I think that maybe is the theme of this episode.
Yeah.
For career, for identity, whatever it is. Big time. And that's the word I love to use, self-discovery.
And you'll feel that there is like an icky feeling. I mean, it's hard because you might accidentally do something that you get lots of praise for, which was a lot of my childhood. And so you enjoy doing it. It might not necessarily fulfill you, but it feels fucking good because you're getting a lot of praise.
Yeah. And there's that viral TikTok video. Pace and I were talking about, where this guy says a lot of people will be personal trainers because they have good genetics and they're very fit, and people say you should be a personal trainer.
Yeah.
Or it's like, is this person good at rugby? What is the example you used? He said, this person's good at rugby because they're naturally quite big.
Yeah.
And then they kept pursuing it, which means they got better and better and better. So they're not big because of rugby. They do rugby because they're big.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, just because you're smart at math or science doesn't mean you should pursue it. And because you're getting all these, this praise. And so I think you really just have to, once you finish school, just reinvent yourself. Just not reinvent, just take time.
Well, just,
down.
remind yourself that you are, if I can, give any show from just living, is a change of scenery is, oh my God.
Oh, a wake up.
It's such a wake up. And if it isn't, then keep changing it.
Yeah. But no, it's so true, because I grew up in the Shire. Do you know Southern Shire?
Oh yeah, I've heard lots about
and
the Shire.
It's such a bubble.
It's crazy.
It's beautiful. It's because it's so beautiful.
Yep.
There's so much nature, but it's such a bubble of a predominantly middle-class white.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just like, oh my God, it's so comfortable that no one ever leaves. Like, so many people I know are still there. Like, if I was to give advice to anyone in my school, I'd be like, get out of there. Like, you have to get out. It's because it's beautiful. It's a lovely area, but you just don't grow there. And you don't meet new people.
That's exactly it.
Because you stay with all your high school friends because you're comfortable. And like, you got to rip yourself out, which is Fabio's story.
Yeah.
He lost his job because of COVID. He said he never would have quit his job.
Right.
But then he got fired.
And it's so funny. We're all trying to find that inner thing. And you just want to be like, it's in the uncomfortability.
Yeah.
It's in the fear.
The unknown.
It's in the unknown. And I know that's so hard, and it's 100% is privilege. Like, if you have kids or whatever, like, it's always for each individual person, but just know that there's no rule saying that you have to be comfortable. It's all your choice.
That's the beauty of this podcast. I'm talking to 16 and 25-year-olds. So I can say with confidently, now this is the best time to take risks.
Yeah.
Because you probably don't have kids.
Yeah.
Or a mortgage.
Yeah.
Or people to look after. Like, once you hit, whatever age and you start having kids, man, taking a risk is a whole nother ballgame.
100%.
Because you're looking after two people.
And it's so different for anyone having a uterus, anyone who wants to give birth. Like, it's, you are just kind of forced to think about that sort of stuff.
Like, you got a time clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is such a good time. And the best part is, like, I don't know, doing that exploration in that time just fast tracks everything else. And I'm sure there's some stats out there, just severely decreases your chance of ridiculous midlife crises.
Yeah, probably.
So ridiculous.
That's where it comes up, when it's just, you just keep it bottled for so long. But like, the come up is the best bit. I was talking about this with Josh and Luke, who our friend, he's a travel vlogger. And he's surviving off $4 a day in India and crashing in hostels is the best. Me and Pace, this is a great house, but it's also a piece of shit. Like, it's moldy and wet and damp. And I know one day when I've got a nice house, I'm living with nice sunlight, we'll look back and be like, how good were those days?
Yep.
There's that quote from The Office. Have you seen The Office? Like, the last episode.
No, I've
and
done
Andy's just like, I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before they're gone.
Yeah.
It's now. You're in the good old days. You're always in the good old days.
Yeah.
You're going to look back on these times. And I think that's where it's like, how you live your days is how you live your life. People get too caught up on when I get this, when I get to the future, when I become fully paid, when I'm on stage, when I'm doing this. It's like, just learn to enjoy the process and the journey, and you'll be so much more internally happy. Yes.
Oh my God. None of this, like, the rewards at the end. Like, if you need that, like, I do that stuff all the time, light at the end of the tunnel, but it is always the journey, and we all, learn the hard way, but
you still need something to look forward to and hope.
Yeah.
But you don't want to lean on that, because they've shown, like, the hedonic treadmill, they call it.
Yeah.
Which is where as soon as humans, as we get happy, we go back down to where we were. And if they've done studies with people who won the lottery and they went up, then they came back down. They've done people studies who've, like, lost limbs. They've gone way down, but they eventually come back up. So we're always at this kind of baseline. And maybe the question is, how do you raise your baseline?
Yeah. That was fantastic.
And so,
like, your base health.
Yeah, like, what your base, like, I guess, level of happiness, because you're never just gonna be happy all the time.
No,
life hits you. You're always gonna have ups and downs.
Yeah.
So I guess just understanding that as humans, whenever we achieve something, we go, what's next? Oh, I played on stage. I want to do 200 people. Oh, now I want to do 500 people.
Yeah.
Now I want to do 1,000. Now I want to sell at a stadium. And we're never happy. So you got to enjoy the process.
It's never enough. Never enough. Never. That took a while before I spontaneously came out.
It did, it really did, actually. It's like the end of it.
That's crazy.
I was about to bring up the last question. Final question.
Okay.
Which is, I mentioned I start with one question, I close with one.
Fantastic.
And it's very simple. What advice would you give to an 18-year-old today?
I would follow your heart.
Now we've broken the dam.
Oh goodness, it really is to, give yourself that space. You know, keep in mind that you've been kind of pushed into a space that is probably created so that a bunch of people can coexist together. But now you get the opportunity to just exist on your own for the first time in a really long time. And it is going to be so uncomfortable and it is going to make no sense. But that is the shit. Like that is it. And that's what it's meant to be. And feel those highs and feel those lows. But it won't help trying to escape it through something that's comfortable. Just wait until that natural pull and feel yourself get pulled. Get excited about things. Tell your parents, I'm going to go do this. And then completely change your mind and keep telling them you're going to do different things and have them say, oh, you're always changing your mind. You're like, I'm just following excitement in life and you just want me to do one boring thing. Like,
and it's like, that's what this time should be.
Yeah.
Just figuring it out.
Just
like the next 5 years, if for like 18-year-olds, it's like you've got a 5-year window where you can just go high risk, high reward.
Yep.
And if you fail, you're 23.
Please just
like, who cares?
Just fail nonstop.
Yeah.
Like all of the failures. And then you'll look back and go, oh, okay, this is how I felt about all those times. And it's funny because your body kind of naturally slows down. So you will notice that it will be harder to make. It is always generally harder for people to make changes as they get older. So that energy you have to just dive into things, just follow that.
Well, they've done studies.
Forward.
They've done studies on that. Like it's, as your brain gets older, it takes more energy to make these big decisions.
Yeah.
And so, use that, leverage the time.
And like you said, block out the noise.
Yeah.
There's always going to be noise, unfortunately. Just do your best to follow your gut and,
jump into the unknown.
Yes, wholeheartedly. And with as much noise if possible, and express all of that shit. Just express yourself. For my inner child, if everyone could just do that.
Jump into the unknown. And another great theme from this was just, you don't have to jump. Baby steps into the unknown. Just take one step at a time. Just like my story, just like your story. It wasn't, I just went bang. I did this. Oh, then I tried makeup. Then I tried nails. Then I tried this. Blah, 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 blah. Right. And I think that's the best way to do it because it's the most realistic way to do it.
Yes.
And for your own sanity of fear of judgment, just take those baby steps and start taking them.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of pressure on, like, you've got to do this one big moment. So I've got to change my fashion. No, just start off by doing this, then that. Whatever it is, apply that to so many areas. Yeah. But Justin, thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
This is a great episode. I've really loved it. I love going more niche into like topics like that. And I love talking about, vulnerability and stuff. So thank you for sharing your story. If people want to follow you online, see your music, just see everything that's happening, where's the best place to go? Just go to the Insta at JMQ Music. And that will have a link to everything from there. Yeah. Everything is at JMQ Music. Yeah. And of course, TikTok and everywhere. I'll link everything below so you can go follow Justin there. But otherwise, thanks for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much, Byron. We did the thing!